Thank you. Good afternoon. Today, May 24th, we are going to have a short Public Works Committee meeting today. We will be meeting again next week at the same time on May 31st for a full agenda meeting. We just had some things to get out of the way. So I'm going to call our meeting to order. Are there any declarations of conflict?
None.
Seeing none, can I get someone to approve our agenda for today?
Under new business, Madam Chair, I know under new business it's an opportunity to give notification. Just through the chair to the manager, is that all right, Madam Chair?
We're not at new business yet, but when we get there, yeah.
No, I just want to add it for
if you want to
notification.
add.
Just a notification. It's not to be dealt with because I
No,
know.
I'll get to the new business at the end of the meeting.
Oh, see, it's not on the agenda.
No, I'm going to add new business to you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Number 6, new business. Or number 5. Thank you for that. Okay, so can I get an approval of our agenda today?
Moved.
We have the 2 tenders on the reports, seconded by Councillor Tweel. Hello, Councillor McAleer. Thank you for calling in.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So we're going to move right into reports for today. We have 2 tenders to look at, and then we'll move on to the new business section. So, Scott, I'm going to turn this over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So yes, in front of you have 2 resolutions for 2 tenders that were recently published, both for street resurfacing. Just because we had such a large pot of funds this year, we figured to create a bit of competition and try to get the best price we could. We wanted to break it up into 2 tenders to make it a more competitive process. And we are happy to say we felt like it was a very competitive process, and we're slightly under our anticipated budget for this year at this moment. As you can see, both tenders went out publicly. We received, for the first tender, 3 bidders, which were Chapman Brothers, Island Construction, and Eminent Resources. And for the first one, Island Construction is the low bid of $1,242,466 plus all applicable taxes. And tender 2, again, we had 2 bidders only this time, Chapman Brothers and Island Construction. And Island Construction was the low bidder on this one at $1,449,425.30 plus all applicable taxes. So we are recommending to award to the low bid of Island Construction for both tender packages.
Thank you. Is there any questions, comments?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Your worship.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through the chair to the manager of Public Works. Scott, I thought in the past we budgeted the paving, street paving through operational. It's under capital. It was always under capital?
Since I've been here, it's always been under capital. I'm not sure what happened before then.
So we take money from the gas tax to help subsidize our capital budget?
We do. We take some from gas tax, and the remaining comes from the general, our borrowed amount that the city borrows for capital expenditures.
So you budgeted 3.5 million, and you're coming in at 2.7, so you have about close to $1 million more to spend if we wish to go that way.
No, that's incorrect. So out of that $3.5 million, there's the umbrella of street resurfacing, but under that we have to do a few different things. One is all our asphalt testing, and we reinstate the line. So any of the markings and all that gets all those funds come out of this budget as well. So I believe we're under budget by around we have about probably $300,000 or $400,000 at the end of the day to spend. So yeah.
Okay. And Madam Chair, again, just looking at the list, and I think I've spoken to the manager about this, Madam Chair. I don't know the science about evaluating asphalt, but I'm sure there's a science to it. And I know there are some streets out in Ward 6 and Ward 8. And I brought those to the attention of the manager. And for the last 5 years now, they're not there yet. And I'm just wondering, is this in-house evaluation? And could I just ask, Madam Chair, is it something you're thinking about too, about the in-house evaluation?
Thank you for your question. I know it is done in-house right now. I did receive an an email from, I think Paul Johnson actually sent out an email with a kind of an explanation, a technical explanation of how things have proceeded through the city. And I actually just spoke with our traffic engineer prior to this meeting, and our assistant manager at the same time, who, trying for me to try to understand the process and the criteria that they use. So, I'm hoping to bring to our committee where maybe we can have some sort of a scan done that will give us a baseline. But I think what we were missing is that there needs to be ongoing assessment all the time around our streets in order to determine, and it is a scientific, technical, Scott, you might be able to jump in and explain it a little bit more, but it's an ongoing thing that they do monitor and evaluate. And there is room also, from what I understand, for improvement, and I think that would be our job as a committee and eventually as a full council to support how we can best improve the process. We have to be more progressive and move. We've got more traffic. We've had different weather, climate that affects our asphalt. There's different things that we have to maybe change the traditional form. But Scott, I'm going to let you continue on.
Certainly. So street reading, how we do it, and a lot of municipalities and jurisdictions do, it's a visual inspection. There are what they call International Road Roughness Index. So it's an IRI, so it's a scan of the road, and all that scans for is rutting and such. And so we don't do that. It has to be done by a machine. Some jurisdictions incorporate that with their visual, so they'll do both of them and combine them. In my experience, a lot of municipalities don't do it for two reasons. One, it's quite expensive, and two, you don't feel the roughness as much in a municipality as you would do on a highway. So it's typically done by a provincial government that has high-speed speedways. Again, it's really just because the roughness that you're measuring, the rutting, it's not as impactful on traffic as it is on the highways. Also with that too is you got to worry about manholes and catch basins and all that stuff as well. Those get picked up in that. And again, I haven't seen a way that any clean cut way that people can use IRI in a municipality to really to have an added value to it. So really the best way that we've found, and that from my experience, is the visual inspection. So the visual inspection can be done a number of ways. It depends on what you're looking for, and then the weighting factor. Those are kind of the two things. So what we do is our staff go out there and look at each segment of road, how they're broken up in terms, typically by block, we break up streets. And what they do, they're looking for potholing, they're looking for raveling, which is essentially, when you look at it, the rock are starting to come out of the asphalt and it's starting to become rougher than it should be. You're looking for potholes and patching. You are looking for visually rutting, and you're also looking for cracking. And so you look at those four items, and then you give each one of them a severity. So you have some severe cracking, but then there's also another number you give for cracking. So say we go out in the street and we see a big crack. So it's a severe crack, but we only see one or two on the whole stretch. So it's a big severity, but we only have one or two, so it gets a low number for our density. And then so patching and potholing. So you could have a lot of small potholes, but they're not really that bad. So we give a low severity, but there's a lot, so we give them a high density. So we plug all those numbers into a formula, and so for each category, you take, and I can provide you more details on how that formula goes, but essentially for each of those four categories, it's weighted to give us 100%. And so we have valued, if I'm not mistaken, potholing is high value, potholing and raveling, or potholing patching. It makes the drive uncomfortable and all that stuff. So it has a high level of, high proportion of the final number. Same with cracking. Cracking is rough to drive on, but it's also detrimental to the structure of asphalt. So we give it a high priority because we want it, so if it's getting a lot of cracking, we do want to replace it sooner rather than later, because the longer you let it sit, the more damage it's causing to your base, and meaning the more costly your repair has to be at the end of the day. So again, we put all those numbers in, and it spits out a number. It can give us a really low number, as low as 2 and 1. That means a road is completely gone, all the way to 10, which is a perfect, pristine, brand new paved road. And so then once all those sections are reviewed and all those numbers are input into an Excel spreadsheet and gives us that rating number, we rearrange them so that the highest or the lowest number is at the top of the list. And then we say, okay, we know this street requires a full rehab, which is pulverize, put base, and then seal. And that's where things start to get costly. When you start doing this method, you're doing a lot more full rehab versus mill and pave and maintaining what you have. And so that's why some jurisdictions haven't moved or have moved away from worst to first, because it's not the best bang for your buck. But again, that's our method. We can always review that at a later date, but currently that's how we do it. So again, we take that street, we say, we define if it needs to be just mill paved or pulverized base seal. Then we put those inputs in. We know the square area of asphalt we have to replace. We know a rough idea of the price is going to be to replace that. And then we essentially say, okay, we have $3 million. We go down the list until we hit $3 million. And that's our list of streets.
A question, Madam Chair.
Absolutely. Councillor McAleer, go ahead.
Madam Chair, or maybe through to the manager, I'm not sure. Just like on these paving contracts, like the allocation, 3.5 million and 2.7. But does that also include, like, if there's streets that have potholes here and there's got to be some patch work and that sort of thing done? Is that all part of?
No, Councillor. So that is any street that does not fall on this resurfacing program. We have our own internal crews that do just regular maintenance of filling potholes around the city.
Okay, so, right. Which is separate from this money we're talking about.
Correct. It's an operational expense.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Okay. All right.
Thank you, Councillor McAleer. Scott, with your list, when you go down your list and your worst is first methodology, and you're right, maybe we, have to look at, to me, if there's streets that are sitting at 2 and 3, that's pretty severe. Would you have any idea how many streets fit that category? Because if anything, as a council, we need to look at what we're investing as far as budget into replacing these streets. I think that's what happens is we allot so much money, but if we have 40 streets that are sitting at a 3, that's not acceptable. So our job would be look at how do we fix that and get our infrastructure up to stuff without it being like fair amongst district and the politics that get involved in the paving piece. I would like you to be able to present to council to say, here's the evaluation and the data that's been given, and this is why we're doing what we're doing. I think, and being able to share that publicly so residents understand too, kind of what's been evaluated and understand that.
Absolutely. So we did circulate an email on how we do the process, and I can recirculate to everyone as well, just so it's at the top of everyone's inbox. And it's definitely something we can publish publicly. We can work with comms to make sure that gets out so people are aware of that. Now, we'll advise council as well. There are times our street may be low on the list, but we pull it because we know in the next year or two, we're going to be doing major rehab, or there's a lot of construction in the area. Why are we going to resurface a street where we know there's going to be a lot of heavy truck traffic coming in and out, water and sewer connections, all that good stuff. So we do that planning as well when we go look at this stuff. So there is a lot of thought on how we, what the list, what we recommend to you folks as going public. We do hear the complaints. People want a new system, fair system, and it's very challenging. We definitely want to look into it. I think it's time that we have a look at maybe adjusting our formula. It hasn't been updated for a number of years now. So I think this summer we've already committed to looking at that, seeing, doing another just jurisdictional look at what other folks are doing, what formulas they're using, and as well we would like to do that and provide an update on this later this year on what our plans are for next year.
I think that would be great if we had something in place and further discuss, but I would be very interested to see just for interest sake, to see where we sit at how many streets are sitting on your 3 scale.
Right, yep, and we can definitely
Where
we
we're
can
at
share
with
that,
that,
yeah.
because I think that
Yeah.
will give us a guide to move forward as far as, again, just
And
making
then-
sure that,
yeah.
yeah.
And one other thing I'd like to share too that we're going to commit to doing this year is we're going back and collecting all the historical data of all the streets that have been paved over the past, as far as we can dig back, and it's valid good information that we can put into a spreadsheet. And what we're doing is we want to see over the past 10, 15 years, how many streets we were able to resurface. So square meters, how much road work we were able to do in those years. Because at the end of the day, we need to be able to provide you folks better information on, we usually strive to only repair a road every 15 to 20 years. With proper maintenance, we can get residential streets up to that point. But the challenge is we don't truly know if only investing $3 million or $4 million every year, is that enough to meet our network worth of street of over 265 lane kilometers of roadway. We don't know if we're meeting that. So that's something that we have students this summer who are working with us. They're collecting all that data, and that's something that later this summer, early fall, we want to bring back to council. Great times once we start talking budget. How do we want to tackle this problem, or if it is even a problem at all? So those are some things that you're going to be starting seeing over this year. We're hearing it loud and clear from folks that they would like to see some change or provide better information to you folks, and that's the goal this summer, is we want to be able to provide you folks, all of council, with that new information so that we can make informed, educated decisions.
And I think if we have that, and it's explained in simple terms, because engineer language and the average don't always equal. So, to me, that was great explanation today. I feel a little bit better. Is your worship, are you understanding a little more? Councillor Tweal, do you have a question? I'm sorry, I didn't see your light on there, dear. Go ahead.
Thank you. Well, I can recall back a few months ago, I asked about the criteria that is executed when it comes to the assessment and evaluation of streets in our city. And I listened very carefully what Scott was saying, but when he talked about we don't want to let the streets go down to, say, the base where it would cost a lot more to replace the base, and I appreciate that, but I think what happens on some occasions is that streets that are in the middle get caught and that they don't get repaved. And I would certainly be interested in a formula. Obviously, we need a formula, but from a fairness perspective, it's nice to see roads, streets being repaved. I would go on the record and say equally and fairly across the city. We could even look at some wards on a case study to look at their streets and sidewalks, and well, how come this particular district seems to have better street paving and sidewalks as compared to other parts of the city? So I would like to do a case study. I know that each one of us are we're here for a reason. We're here to represent our constituents, and I think as long as you see progress being distributed equally and fairly across the city, I think people, for the most part, will be more accepting and be more tolerant and more supportive. But they've got to see on an annual basis work being done in the respective wards, I would suggest. And that's not to nullify or negate the formula that you referenced, Scott. In fact, you even said yourself, and look at it and see if there's some fine tuning of the formula. I'm all for that. I'd like to take that formula and implement a strategy in each district, and then people can say, oh, okay, we're going to do the worst first according to that formula, but we're going to see progress across the city. We have to see that investment across the city, again, being distributed equally and fairly. I know I know Bob Duran advocated that at our last meeting, and I somewhat agree with Bob because the residents are watching and they want to see progress regardless of what service we provide in the city. They want to see progress in each section of the city, and you know what? That's only natural. It's being respectful and it's reasonable. I would argue. So I do want to thank you for your explanation, Scott. I mean, you know, I was going to say to you that's easy for you to say, trying to explain that formula, but I mean, you know, we're all under pressure here. We're all trying to provide services, and that's our job. And I'd like to strike that balance, Scott. I really would. I'd like to strike that balance where it is done equally and fairly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Twill, and I understand totally. I know, you know, our job is to represent a specific ward, but our job is also to manage the taxpayer money for the entire city of Charlottetown. And when we look at things, how they've been done in the past, I think, you know, with the new MGA and trying to keep politicians out of the operational stuff, I'm hoping that if he can come back and look at scales of 2, 3, 4, you know, for me, I know I only have one road on the list, I think, in Ward 9 this year, maybe 2.
A2.
But either way, I'm celebrating that, and I'm letting residents know, hey, our infrastructure's in pretty good shape out there. So aren't we lucky right now that we're not a 1 or 2? I understand that. I just think that it's really going to be challenging to put scientific data in place on the shapes of the roads with specific wards, but I think you've always tried to, you know, look at that. As far as those roads in the middle that you talk about, that's up to us as a council, whether we want to improve more money so that they can get further and down that list. It's going to be interesting. Scott, do you think you can provide this year's assessment so we could at least have a look to see where things were, just so we can understand? Is that something we can do?
We can provide like the ranking. It's
Yeah.
quite a number of multi-page document, and
Even a couple pages just to show us kind of what it looks like for you and help us
show you.
understand.
Yeah, absolutely. So essentially, what I'll do is I'll update my email to go to council and to provide that sample. Information.
That communication piece, I think, will, if people could understand why things are the way they are a little bit, and again, in simple language,
Yeah.
then hopefully they understand, you know, we are here for sure to advocate, and we always do that to the best of our ability. And hopefully that, yeah, it's not us getting caught up in that part. But go ahead, Councillor Twill.
You know, you referenced the MGA. I'm not sure what the MGA has to do with the delivery of services in the respective districts. And I have to question that. I have to question, in some cases, the interpretation of the MGA. Again, we're all responsible for a constituency. I'm not sure what section of the MGA states that, you know, you can't effectively represent your constituents. That's why we're here. So, and the MGA, that's another issue for another time, hopefully not too far away. But I mean, the MGA itself needs a major overhaul in terms of powers and responsibilities and, you know, elected officials and what our jobs are, because I really believe that this current MGA, the pendulum has swung too far the other way, much too far the other way. And, you know, we're people count us to, people are reasonable, but they want a service and delivery on a consistent annual basis, and they want to be able to see those tangible results. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention.
Madam Chair.
One moment, thank you. And I guess for me, I just want to respond to the MGA. To me, I appreciate that there's always room to improve in some of these things, but what the MGA does, Councillor Tweels, it takes away what you indicated was a problem in the past, where politicians or political people become involved in the day-to-day operations of the city. And all of us hear from residents when they believe that their road is in need of impairment or they need a certain service, but we're not the expert people to determine whether or not that happens. That's why it's so important for the manager to come forward and be able to justify why. We do policies, we do procedures, and we do budget. That's the role. And that's to prevent what you indicated happened for a long time in the city, where people got involved and things maybe weren't done properly or fairly. At least now, if you can justify the reason why they're being done, it takes away all that favoritism or ward systems. Anyway, that was my understanding. Your worship, do you have anything to add to that?
Madam, just going back to the list. Again, Madam Chair, just want to go through you to the manager. Mount Everett Road, McAleer Drive to Sherwood Drive. Okay. I've been receiving some emails from owners out there that are asking for a pathway, because right now, if someone, as you know, you have Gallant's catering out there. You have also coaches. So there's some enterprises where there's people walking. So could we add a pathway? I don't know if this is on the east side or the west side of Mount Everett Road, but is there possibility to add something that could provide some safety and security for pedestrians? That's my first question. It's at the top, the list.
So right now, we are planning on widening that road with asphalt, just because it's undersized for
Okay.
the amount of truck traffic. So there will be a paved shoulder out there. Everything will be striped and fixed up out there. You're probably very familiar with the area. It's in
I am.
rough shape. It has taken a beating over the years because of truck traffic, and
Yeah.
it just because it wasn't built up to standards for handling such heavy truck traffic. So shoulders will be widened as part of this project.
But, Madam Chair, widening the shoulders, that's great out in rural PEI, but when you get into urban areas, I think that sense of security is paramount. Whether you're working out there or you're walking to the trail, just try to keep that. We might not be able to do it this year, but I'd like to see it part of the plan next year. And I'd like to follow up on one other matter that the manager brought to our attention. The email he sent out on April 13th or April 19th. So as Mr. It says a total approximately 9 kilometers worth of resurfaced streets. So Mr. Adams says we have about 260 kilometers of roads and streets in Charlottetown. 9 kilometers? That's a drop in the bucket. And I agree with him. We have to look more at putting money or funding towards more paving, because we're never going to catch up. Because by the time we get finished those 260, we're back to the first 9 that we did 20 years ago. No, it would be more than 20 years ago. If you divide 9 into 260, you're looking at about 30 years. So we have to take a hard look at this, Madam Chair, because these are the numbers that count. You know,
Absolutely.
and I know who gets what area gets what. That's important. But if we want to make sure we get a fair and equitable treatment across the city, requires more money.
And
You know-
that's what we want to collect, all that information, show what has been done over the past years, how many kilometers.
Yeah.
And project that, what it would, and provide a couple examples. If we wanted to say, our goal is to resurface every road every 15 years, 20 years, 25 years, what that amount of budget over those 25 years or over that period that we're trying to achieve, what that would cost, and see what council is comfortable with spending each year.
Yeah, so, Madam Chair, I thought the number, again, not to prolong this, I know you want to get going because it's a beautiful day out there, but I was looking at 800,000. The manager is saying it's probably 400,000, 500,000. I think because this is a capital item, I would look at some point, maybe at our next regular monthly meeting, add another 500 or $700,000 to the capital budget to do more paving. Like, if we're going to catch up, let's you know what, let's practice what we preach. If we're going to be preaching this, that we need more, let's do it.
Put that on the new business for point of order for our next meeting.
That's what I was going to put on the,
Yep, you can add that. You can. And I think you're right. I guess it's whether or not, what are our priorities? That's why the strategic plan that we developed is so important too. We heard from the residents. They want up-to-date infrastructure, active transportation trails, all these things. So we need to put our bang behind that and support it. Do you have any more questions right now, Councillor Twill?
No, I'm certainly in favor of adding more money to our infrastructure.
Okay, we'll add that.
Street paving and active transportation pathways. Again, the expectations are very reasonable in half the constituents. I'm in favor of adding more money. I will reiterate, I would just like to see it done equally and fairly and distributed equally and fairly across the city so people can see that progress in their respective neighborhoods and communities.
Very
With
fair.
the formula that
Yep.
you outlined, Scott.
We're going to ask, so we're now going to move, before we get to we'll move that, we'll go into the new business section for next month. And what I've heard so far is we would like to look at discussion around more money into our paving.
We,
We would like to see the summary of some criteria of some of the streets that we've talked about today, so we could just have a little bit better visual. That could be added.
And
And Councillor McAleer, did you have something else to add?
yeah, I'd like to talk about speed bumps.
Yeah, well, there's a policy. We can look at review the policy and have a discussion around that. But if it's an operational thing, you can also have a conversation with Mr. Adams.
Yeah. Well, and that may do in the meantime too. Yeah, I'd just like to understand about inventory and allocation and new requests, and just understand the process a little better.
Sure. I mean, if you would like, you could start with Scott, when you get back, have a look at our policy that we adopted a couple of years ago. And then if there's something you think needs to be amended in that policy, we could certainly bring it back to committee level at that point.
Yeah.
Okay. And also, Scott, I think what we would like is, we know that there's been discussion around the new plans for the active transportation pathways around Lilac and Cedar. And I'm going to add that to the next agenda so we could look at the next steps based on the feedback that was received from the public.
That's already on it.
That's wonderful. So
Madam
that'll
Chair,
be for next
that
week.
was one of the issues I wanted to add. And I speaking to the chair that there is a possibility, I know other councillors have had neighborhood meetings, so the councillor from that area could bring together a neighborhood meeting at Sherwood Hall, and we could have some of our technical staff there to go over the proposed plan. But Madam Chair, just to get back to the paving,
Yeah.
this is considered as a hallelujah moment, because most times we add to the paving budget on election year, and this is first of our 4 years, and we're going opposite. So that's good news, and I think that's a good start.
Thank
So-
you. Yeah, that's good. It's because we're great communicators when you have a female chair. Isn't that wonderful?
And Madam Chair, could we get an update or just some kind of communication maybe on the I know it's not city's responsibility, but there was the on Buchanan Drive there, the sidewalk that the Walmart parking lot, that was there was some fanfare about it. It'd be nice to see if we could.
We wouldn't have the opportunity to ask the property owner because it's private property. So Scott's just saying that wouldn't be something we'd be getting involved with as far as going to look for any kind of update. That would have to come from the private property owner.
Yeah. So yeah, you don't think would be out of our lane, would we, to ask the question? Is it going to happen? I mean, it's certainly a safety issue.
I think it would be out of our lane to take a lead from that from the city's perspective. Yeah. You could probably ask him if you want to have a conversation the next time you're at the Walmart or whoever owns that property, but I don't think that the city's going to take the lead on that one.
It's owned by Smart Centres out of Montreal. Madam Chair, we have to vote on these resolutions. Can
Yeah, can you just let me get to them?
I back, because I want to speak to the resolution.
All right. So we have two resolutions that we're going to look to get through committee today to get to council. The first one is the public tender for 2023 Package A and the submission of $1,242,466 plus all applicable taxes be accepted. Do I have any discussion? Have someone to move that?
I'll move it.
Second that? Second.
So, Madam Chair, just on this tender, on the HST, right? Because it's a capital project, we do get, is it a CGEM multiple, what's the grant, not the grant, but the tax recovery? Is there a 10% or a 5% recovery on it?
We budget for 10, because that's all the city pays for upfront is 10% HST, but then there's a rebate through finance at the end of the year that there's an additional 5%. But to raise a purchase order, we have to budget 10%. So that's
But-
where you thought of roughly $1 million. No, we're down to the 400,000 because we have to include taxes in our purchase order. So that's
But do we get the 10% back for the provincial or the 5?
we
just the
only
5?
get the 5% back. So the city always pays 5% at the end of the day, but at the beginning, to raise a PO, we have to account for 10%, and then on the back end, the city gets a rebate from the province for the additional 5% for all capital projects.
Okay, and just on another, I know we tried this a few years ago, Madam Chair. This is on.
It's still on this resolution?
It's related to the resolution. Is there any possibility that microsurfacing could be revisited as part of our paving under?
It's already been thought about. It's an option that we want to revisit because it is a way of extending our pavements at a much lower cost for sure. So that's a great treatment for those 4s and 5s and 6s to extend them for another 6-7 years potentially.
Yep.
So yes, we are looking at potentially a late fall or late summer, early fall. If we could make it happen. There are some funds available, and one of the goals is we're going to look at what we could do with those funds and bring those options back to council or committee for further discussion.
And his worship's excited to give more money, so maybe it's a good time to come back with even a little, something that we could look at to include for that.
Oh, no, Madam Chair, I'm echoing your enthusiasm.
Yes, I am excited. So I have a mover and a seconder to move this first resolution on. Everybody in favor?
Question, yep.
Councillor McAleer?
Yes, I'm in favor.
Wonderful. We'll look at the second resolution, which is the tender for Package B and the submission for Island Construction Limited, $1,449,425.30, plus all applicable taxes be accepted. Do I have someone to move that resolution? Moved, seconded? Seconded by Councillor Tweel. All those in favor? Are you in favor, Councillor Tweel? Sorry, Councillor McAleer. I'm sorry.
Yes, yes.
Okay, it's been a long day. Okay, so that one goes on to council for approval, and I'll look forward to seeing you guys again, same place next week, May 31st. Motion to adjourn, seconded. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Great.